Welcome to this Learn, Make, Create class with Annie's Creative Studio. I'm Ashley Parker, and today's project is the Cuppa Crochet Carryall designed by Debra Arch. Today I'm going to show you how to do a single crochet join, how to sew a chain stitch seam, as well as how to assemble your Cuppa Crochet Carryall. If you're already a member, download your pattern before we get started, and if you're not already a member, you can join today to start watching today for free. The materials that we'll need in order to make our Cuppa Crochet Carryall are 1 skein of Omega Symphonia Light DK weight yarn, which is a mercerized cotton, or 218 yards of a similar yarn. You'll also need a F or 3.75 millimeter crochet hook, or whatever crochet hook size that you need in order to obtain the gauge given in the pattern. We'll need a 1 1/8 inch round button in the color of your preference, a stitch marker, a tapestry needle, a pair of scissors, and 4 Clover mini wonder clips. So let's get ready to get started. So in our video today, I'm using a worsted weight yarn in order to improve the visibility of what you can see on the camera. So although the material list does recommend that you use a DK or light DK weight yarn, I am going to be using this heavier weight just to help you be able to see what we're doing a little bit easier. And now we're going to be starting with how to do the single crochet join. We first see our single crochet join come up in the pocket top edge of the front pocket. And so we're going to be joining our single crochet join into this corner here. And we have to have the right side facing us. To do a single crochet join, we're going to start by creating a slip knot. So we're going to grab the yarn tail with our hand, wrap it around our fingers, and we want to have that little X here. So I'll show you that one more time. We're going to take our tail and wrap it around our fingers, cross it over, and flip our hand over. I like to use my ring finger to pin that down because I'm going to bring my crochet hook in and I'm going to slip my hook under the first strand and grab the second. And I'm going to grab that second strand and pull it under the first and then pull everything off of my fingers and transfer that onto the hook. Then I'm going to grab both ends of the yarn and tighten that up. And then I'm going to grab the working yarn and pull that knot up to the hook so that way it is nice and tight. We don't want it to be overly tight though. We still want to have that freedom of movement on our hook. And now we're ready to do our join. To do our join, we're going to insert our hook into the top corner here, the first row at the right side edge. And we're going to grab our working yarn. And we're going to yarn over and pull up a loop. So because that slip knot's already on our hook, we should have 2 loops on our hook. And then we're going to yarn over and pull through 2. And that is our single crochet join. Now I'll take that out and I'll show you one more time. We've got our slip knot on our hook. We're going to insert our hook into this last row here. And then we're going to yarn over with our working yarn and pull up a loop. You should have 2 loops on your hook. Then you're going to yarn over and pull through both loops on your hook. And that is your single crochet join completed. I'm going to show you now how to do the pocket seams for our Cuppa Crochet Carryall. Now you can either do a straight stitch or a chain stitch seam, and on our sample here that we have, you can see that they've used a chain stitch seam that looks very similar to like a slip stitch, but this is hand stitch. So I'm going to show you how to do that now. So once you have your pieces completed, you're going to have your front and your pocket completed, and you're going to fold your piece so you have the unworked loops showing at the front and they're going to be at the bottom of your piece. We're going to bring in our little mini wonder clips and we're going to clip the edges together. You want your top edge to be lined up with row 20 of the front. So we're just going to clip these together here This will help to keep it straight and hold it in place for us while we're working. Now that this is all clipped together, we are ready to start seaming our pockets. Now I'm using contrasting colored yarn here in order to make it easier for you to see what we are doing. Now this seam is worked through both layers of our fabric, and you're going to have a 24-inch length of yarn threaded onto a tapestry needle in order to do your seam. We're going to start our seam working from the left side of our project, and we're going to count over 5 rows. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We want to start working between the 5th and the 6th rows. I like to work along the holes in the row here, so that way it also acts as a guide while we're working along to help us keep our seam straight. So once we're ready to start our pocket seams, we're going to start by inserting our hook right above where the unworked loops are. So we're going to go from the back of our fabric to the front, and we're going to come out right, again, we're going to line up where all those little holes are from the stitches in the 5th row here. I'm going to pull my yarn through, and I'm going to leave about 5 or 6 inches at the end to weave in my ends. You can knot the end if that's your preference. However, it is a little cleaner if you leave that tail and you weave it in afterwards. To create a chain stitch, we're going to take our yarn and we're going to create a loop. You're going to use your finger to hold the top of the loop in place, and then you're going to bring the working yarn down to meet the yarn that we just brought through the project. I'll show you that again. So again, we're going to take our yarn, we're going to loop it up, use your finger to hold the top of the loop in place, and then bring the yarn back down to the beginning. All right, so I'm going to move my top finger to show you what you should have. You should have a teardrop shape made out of your yarn. Now I'm exaggerating the size here so we can see it a little easier. You can make it larger or smaller depending on your preference. Smaller will take a little bit longer, but it will tend to look a little bit neater. So what we'll do is we're going to take our finger and hold that onto the top of your loop, and we're going to insert our tapestry needle back in through the same place that we came out of originally. And again, we're working through both layers of our fabric. We're going to pull that, and don't move that finger that's holding that loop, because you don't want to lose that loop when you're pulling the yarn through. You want to keep that in place. All right, so now that I've pulled through, I've got this loop still maintaining on top of my fabric. So I'm going to move my finger down a little bit and hold that in place, and I'm going to take my tapestry needle, come through the back of the fabric, and come out right where the top of that loop will be. I'm going to try and angle that so you can see that a little better. There we go. So I'm coming out right at the top of that loop, because this is going to hold the top of the loop in place and start the next link in our chain. So I'm going to pull that all the way through. And there our loop is held in place. And we're going to repeat creating that loop again. So we're going to create a second loop here. Again, use your finger to hold the top of the yarn down and bring it back down to where we just came out of. You're going to insert your needle right back into the same spot that you came out of at the top of that chain and pull it through to the back of the project. And that is our second loop. We're going to hold that in place, and we're going to come in through the back, from the back of the project, and bring our tapestry needle up through the top where we want the top of the chain to be. See, I think that's a little big, so I'm going to come down a little bit lower, and I'm going to pull that yarn all the way through. Now, if I were to angle my yarn and hold it like this, my loop would remain that size. Or if I pull the yarn towards me gently, it will make the loop smaller. All right, so it does take a little practice to get this even and having all of your loops be the same size, but it does have a really cool effect. So we'll continue making this chain stitch all the way up this piece of the fabric. And I'll show you again. All right, there's our loop coming from the back to the front. And there is our next chain. So we're going to continue creating this chain all the way up to the top of this piece of the project. And then we'll continue to add chains between every 5th and 6th row, working from this seam. So we would count 5 rows from this seam and add a pocket seam. Then we'd count 5 rows from that seam and do another pocket seam. At the end, you should have 8 pockets. And I'll show you on our sample here. I have a little marker. We're creating these pockets that we can put like crochet hooks or pens, markers, or whatever in. So you can see here we have 8 of these pockets. So I'll finish up our seams and I'll meet you back here when we're ready to do the top seam assembly. Now that we have our pocket seams done, we're ready to assemble our piece. We're going to need to start with a slip knot. So we're going to do that by holding on to the tail of our yarn, wrapping it around our fingers, crossing over the strand like so, turning our hand, and pinning the working yarn down with your ring finger. Take your hook and insert it under the first strand and over the second, and pull the second strand out under the first, and pull all of the yarn off of your fingers and transfer it onto your crochet hook. Then you'll pull the working yarn until the knot of the slip knot is snug against your hook. And now we're ready to do our slip stitch join. To do that, we're going to be working through both layers of our fabric. So you want your pocket seams to be facing you, and you have your lining lined up at the top with the last row of your front. You're going to insert your hook through the stitch on the first layer and through the stitch on the second layer. Then you're going to grab your working yarn. You're going to yarn over and pull that loop that's on your hook through the other loop on your hook. Okay, and that's your slip stitch join. And I'll show you that one more time. We've got our slip knot on our hook. And we're going to insert our hook through both layers of fabric, yarn over and pull up a loop. You'll have 2 loops on your hook, and then you're going to pull that loop through the loop already on your hook. And that is your slip stitch join. And now to continue to our assembly, we're going to work through both layers of our pieces and slip stitch into each stitch across here. But you're going to have 8 stitches at the end that will need to be left unworked because they won't have any parts lined up with it from their pocket. So you're going to have 44 slip stitches, and at the end in your lining you'll have 8 unworked stitches. And I'll just pause here, and as you can see, we've joined our piece here, and this is the seam that will sit along the top of the cup here when you place your carryall inside your mug. Thank you for joining me today. I hope that you enjoyed making your Cuppa Crochet Carryall. If you gave this project a try, I would love to see your finished projects. You can now share photos of your work on the shared photo gallery on the Annie's Creative Studio website. You can also share photos of your work on the Annie's Facebook, Pinterest, and Instagram pages. Make sure to use the hashtag Annie's Catalog so we can see your work and share your photos as well. Don't forget to check out Annie's on YouTube. Thanks again for joining me, and join us again for another Annie's Creative Studio episode.